Alberta has tabled its first provincial budget since the pandemic began. And gone are the dreams of balancing the books. It's going to take a $18 billion deficit next fiscal year to lift the province past its current economic troubles.
What was immediately evident to the Premier and to all of Cabinet, however, was the need to prioritize the protection of lives and livelihoods of Albertans during this period of great uncertainty.
Alberta's finance minister says the provincial economy should start to rebound before the end of the year, though a return to pre-pandemic levels won't happen until sometime in 2022. But that will take more spending, nearly $62 billion next fiscal year alone. Top among the spending priorities, healthcare. The construction sector also getting a boost with a hope that it will create thousands of jobs. There's also a $500 million contingency fund to stimulate the economy. Well, advocacy organizations have been appealing to Alberta to ensure there's enough funding for poverty reduction in the new budget. One of those organizations is Vibrant Communities Calgary. I'm joined by its executive director, Meaghon Reid, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let me get your reaction to today's budget. What jumped out at you?
There was a lot of things. I think in some ways there weren't a lot of surprises in this budget. It was very much a stay the same sort of budget that we were anticipating. But for us, we always know that those details come out in the implementation. So how is this budget being experienced by people on the ground? And for us, particularly people who live in poverty in Calgary.
And you know, I'm sure also that those poverty numbers and the way that people are experiencing poverty is impacted by this pandemic. So what would you have liked to have seen considering that?
Well, you're absolutely right. And as a framing orientation for your viewers, coming into the pandemic, there was 189,000 Calgarians that lived in poverty in this city alone. And we believe that there's an additional 77,000 Calgarians who are likely to or have fallen into poverty because of the pandemic. So we were already not doing that well on the poverty landscape. What we know for sure is that it is really expensive to service poverty, and it is more efficient entirely to invest in poverty reduction and prevention measures. So what we would have been looking for in this budget is some investment in affordable housing, investment in early learning and care, investment in income support programs, and making sure that everyday Calgarians who live in poverty were able to afford their basic necessities in life.
Sorry, essentially you're saying that it's more expensive to deal with the impacts of poverty than it is to deal with than to try to prevent it. Now, your organization published a report in December 2020. It outlined what you wanted to see from the budget, and one of the priorities listed was a diversification of local economies. So this new budget put aside $1.5 billion over the next 3 years in some sectors, including energy, agriculture, forestry, fintech, and technology. But talk to us about what some of the other sectors you would have liked to see, and how would that diversification help on this poverty issue that you're talking about?
It's a great question. So we were pleased to see diversification measures in the budget. Those are really positive. And if we look at organizations like Calgary Economic Development, who have really been promoting tech and fintech, these are great moves for our future. From a poverty perspective, though, what we'd be looking out for is whether there's opportunities in this diversification to include vulnerable people. So that looks like job training and upskilling. And how do we get people out of precarious or gig work, which is huge in our city, and into these more stable and diversified jobs?
You talked about investment in education. What did you make of the province not investing more in K-12 education?
Yeah, I think we were expecting to stay the same in some areas, but the way that we tend to look at a budget sometimes is a stay the same investment going to be enough? Given the fact that we have inflation, rising food prices, the cost of living has really increased. So are those keeping pace with what the basic needs of Calgarians are? We are really committed to wanting investment in K-12 and in the post-secondary sector as well, because that is where the talent, the learning, and poverty prevention happens as well. We know that if you are at a certain level of reading, for example, at grade 3, that's a huge indicator about your likelihood to fall into poverty later in life. So that investment, while stay the same is fine, we would be looking at it from the angle of what might be lost as the price of living increases here in Calgary.
So all of these things that you're talking about come at a cost, and we know that there has to be some prioritization. Alberta already has a debt of nearly $100 billion and a budget deficit for the year estimated at $21.3 billion. So in order to fund some of these things that you're talking about, either it's about taking on more debt or redirecting money from somewhere else. Do you see any other place to make cuts?
I see a place to make strengthening moves that are in the existing budget portfolio. So we have a report that was completed by the Calgary Homeless Foundation that says for every $1 that you invest in affordable housing, you realize over $2 in savings to public systems like shelters, hospitals, fire, and police. So right there in our existing budget, there's an opportunity for savings. Additionally, if you look at things like social procurement and procuring locally, building on that Be Local movement that we've all enjoyed through this pandemic, there's an opportunity there to reinvest money into our local economies. So I would say taking the view of how do we shuffle around and move into prevention is an option for us. And the second thing I would say is an investment and a continued investment in civil society. We know that a lot of the nonprofits and charities in Canada do amazing work. They do it efficiently, and they do it at a lower cost. And so making sure we're investing in those places actually create efficiencies within our budget.
All right, Meaghon Reid, the Executive Director of Vibrant Communities in Calgary tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much.